Well, this morning I want to talk with you about what to do with insults, about what to do when you get offended, when somebody says something that was just horrible and there's no excuse for it, and it makes you mad, and you go home thinking about it, and you go to sleep thinking about it. Then you get on the phone and talk about it, and then you get online and on Facebook and talk about it, and the next thing you know, you're in a funk. And I want to start out with a parable that some of you probably will recognize, especially the older you are. It's one of my favorite stories. I believe it's the best of all the Uncle Remus stories. Burr Rabbit and the Tar Baby. Now, if there's any story that demonstrates how we can get stuck in negative emotion, how we can get stuck and lose our freedom, lose our joy, it's this one. I almost hope you haven't heard it, so I can be the first one to tell you. Once there was a rabbit whose name was Burr. And Burr Rabbit was a smart little rabbit. He was a quick rabbit. He was fast on his feet. He could dart. He could curve. And the fox and the bear could not catch Burr Rabbit in a fair race to save their life. He could go in places they couldn't. He could outsmart them. He could outfox even Brer Fox. So one day, Brer Fox had to start using his head instead of his legs if he wanted to catch Brer Rabbit and make some fine rabbit stew. And so what Brer Fox did is he and Brer Bear cooked up a big cauldron of icky, gooey, sticky tar. And once the tar was nice and black and gummy, they fashioned a little boy out of the tar. Sculpting is what you might call it. It was artwork. They made a little boy that looked like a little boy. They put eyes, nose. They put a coat. And when the bear wasn't looking, Brer Fox even snatched some hair from his tail and stuck it up under the tar baby's cap. And it looked like a little boy. Only it wasn't a little boy. And they sat the tar baby down beside the road. And before long, here comes Burr Rabbit. He was having a zippity-doo-dah day. He was whistling, singing, happy, bouncing along down the road, and he saw the little boy, and he hollered out, "How do you do?" But the tar baby was so rude and so insolent that he did not even acknowledge Burr Rabbit. Just ignored him. Does it make you feel angry when somebody ignores you? I mean, I've been told that to be ignored is one of the worst of insults, and Burr Rabbit knew that. And so Burr Rabbit stopped. And with his hind foot, he scratched the back of his head. Did this just happen? Did he not speak to me? He turned around and he got a little closer to the tar baby and he said, "Maybe you didn't hear me. I said, 'How do you do?'" But the tar baby said nothing. And that really got to offending Burr Rabbit. It would offend me. Somebody that's too good to speak to me. You know how you ever had to make somebody speak to you? You know what I'm talking about? Well, Burr Rabbit decided to make him. I said, "How do you do?" But the tar baby just looked right at him and ignored him again. Burr Rabbit said, "Listen, I'm going to say it one more time, and if you don't speak to me, I'm going to let you have it." But the tar baby still said nothing. Burr Rabbit reared back, pow, right in the kisser. But his fist got stuck in the tar. And Burr Rabbit said, "Let go of my fist." But that tar baby wouldn't let go of his fist. And the tar baby still said nothing. And so Bear Rabbit came with a left hook, wham, caught him in the belly, and that fist stuck too. Let go of my fist! And he reared back with both hind legs and kicked the tar baby, and they stuck too. And lastly, he butted him with his head and bit him. And he thrashed and he kicked and he hit and he punched and he wrestled until finally, next thing you know, he was so stuck up in the tar he could scarcely move his eyeballs. And that's when Bear Fox and Bear Bear came out. And that's when Bear Rabbit realized he had messed up. He had lost his freedom. And I want you to see the progression there, and I want you to see yourself in this story, because like a whole lot of children's stories, this is really a story about us. It's a story about the way our minds work and the messes we get ourselves all stuck in. You see how with Bear Rabbit, one thought, one negative thought set him up for the next negative thought. And that negative thought triggered another negative thought, which eventually led to a negative action. And that triggered yet another negative action until finally he'd lost his freedom. And he was no longer singing zippity-doo-dah day. Oh, it was gummy, and it was icky, and it was nasty. He ruined his day. Have you ever ruined your day through a progression of negative thoughts that led to negative talk, which led to even worse negative action? And by the end of the day, whatever joy you might have started with is long gone. Never done that. No. Me either, but I've heard that some people do that. And man, have I done that? Good Lord. I've done that about 1,001 times, and I'll probably do it again before I die. But the difference is now I see it coming, and I recognize a tar baby when I see it. I recognize an emotional tar baby. And I'm learning to recognize that some arguments are not worth it. Some fights aren't worth it. There are some that are, but a person, we got to learn how to pick our battles. Because here's the thing, there's never a shortage of insults, especially if you're looking for them and you like them. Because, people can get addicted to the strangest things. Michael Witt and I have often talked about how back before we became so enlightened and spiritually wise, we used to almost enjoy getting mad. We used to almost like it. And you start getting mad about something somebody posted on Facebook, this text that you received, and boy, is it ever easy to misread a text. Y'all know what I'm talking about? I sent my brother a text yesterday it was like a 5-word text, but I had to put so much effort into making sure this does not sound smart-alecky. Because it's so easy when you can't see the person's face and you can't hear their tone of voice, and about the best you can do is put the little smiley face or winky face beside it. But for all we know, you just put that there to cover up your insult so that you could get it by us. See, there's something in us that almost enjoys being mad. Don't take my anger away from me. Now, how does that work? What's going on there? Well, I discovered a new podcast this week that I would strongly recommend you check out. This is a Christian lady. Her name is Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is I guess you'd consider her a psychologist. She's actually a cognitive neuroscientist. A cognitive neuroscientist who studies the brain and talks about what happens, what physiologically happens in the brain when we start escalating, when we take offense at something and then we start chewing on it. And, there are some things, remember when you were a kid and your mama made you eat something that you really didn't want to eat? Like, I've heard that mountain oysters are like this. The more you chew them, the bigger they get in your mouth. They just get bigger and bigger, and it's harder and harder to swallow. There are things like that can get in your head, and chemical changes actually happen. Physiological changes. Here's what Dr. Caroline Leaf says. She says that when we take offense, we get angry. The tar baby insulted me, bruised my ego. What happens is when we have an angry thought, this resentment, here's what I can do to fix them. Here's what I'm going to say the next time they say that. Do you know what actually happens in your brain when you do that? It actually gives you a small dopamine rush. It gives you a small dopamine rush, which means it gives you a temporary high. But if you know anything about getting high, you know that high is always followed by low. And little highs are followed by little lows, but it creates a disequilibrium. And so you feel the low and you start thinking about something negative and dark again, and it gives you another little rush, which is followed by another little downer. And that's how people get stuck in negative cycles. That's what disturbs the peace. That's what disturbs peace of mind. And that's why we have to practice mental housekeeping every day. Now, working mamas, daddies, you know that you can't do a thorough house cleaning every day because you come home and there's kids to take care of. But you can at least keep a few things straight. Try to keep the dishwasher running. Try to get the plates and the cups flowing that direction. Real quick, turn on the washing machine, throw some clothes in there, go do something else. You got to do a certain amount of house cleaning even on a daily basis. And then on Sunday, you got a day that you can do a thorough house cleaning. That's what maybe a lot of us need to do today. And I'm talking about mental house cleaning because junk accumulates in our minds day by day. Every time something bugs us, every time something irritates us, every time somebody ignores us, every time we feel insulted. And by the way, another thing about the Burr Rabbit story, it teaches you that you can get insulted whether the other person intended for you to be insulted or not. If you've done this sort of thinking long enough, you've trained your brain to expect insults, offenses, and you will sometimes pick up on offenses and insults that aren't even there. And if you find yourself doing that, you need to listen extra hard today, because what's happened is you've actually built some of that into your brain. The good news is it's possible to begin taking that apart and redoing it. But this mental house cleaning thing, think about, you've seen the TV shows about hoarders. Maybe you are one. Maybe you live with one. Maybe you got a relative who's one. You know, in the home or the garage of a hoarder, there are just these little narrow pathways. You know what I'm talking about? And stuff is stacked up on every side, and there's no place to really live. You can't have a party. You can't have anybody over. But think about the implications of that. You can't have a party. You can't really enjoy yourself. You can't really relax and be at peace and have healthy friendships when your mind is full of hoarded grudges and slights and insults that you're still working on, and eventually you're going to take care of that person, or you're praying real hard that God will take care of them and fix them good and settle their hash and give them what they need. There are people who hoard grudges, and it makes for one nasty, toxic mind. That reminds me of I know a man who's works in insurance, and he went out to work on a claim at the home of a hoarder. This happened here in Polk County. The lady was leading him out through the garage in between all these piles of junk, and she got to one closet door and opened it and then slammed it back real hard and stood up against it. Oh, he's in there. Who's in there? What's she talking about? Well, who's in there? Oh, he's mad. She peeped again, slammed it. Oh, he's in there, and he's real mad. He said, who is in there? What are you talking? Who's he? I said, see, this woman was such a hoarder. She had so much junk, it attracted rats. And she said, I've got this terrible rat problem, so I turned a snake loose in there to kill the rats. And I had some fly paper out. And now and now the snake's got stuck in the fly paper, and oh, he's mad. Do you see that when you hoard grudges, you hoard offenses, you not only clutter up your mind, you attract rats and snakes, and you get all kind of sticky, nasty situations that really would be embarrassing if some people could walk through your brain and see what's really there. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I have been there and done that. Way too much. And so the last thing I want to do, if you're a collector of grudges and insults, I don't want to make you feel bad or guilty or evil. It happens to the best of us. It can't happen to anybody, so don't be ashamed, but also recognize this is not going to take you anywhere good. And the sooner you can recognize what's happening and reverse the process, the sooner you can go free and live in an uncluttered soul where everything is in its proper place and things are clean and sanitary and there's peace and you can have company and you can have friends and you can have deep relationships. But when you're all stuck up in the tar, it's hard for anybody to get close to you because you'll draw them into your negativity. And after a while, people start realizing that and they start avoiding you. And it can lead to loneliness and all sorts of things. And all of this goes into some things that the Bible talks about in very straightforward ways. For example, in Matthew 5:25, Jesus said, settle matters quickly with your adversary. Just let that sink in. Settle matters quickly with your adversary. I've already said there's no shortage of things to get offended by, insulted over. Some of them are worth your attention. I'll say more about that in a moment. But when there really is something that you know somebody did or said with the intention of creating hurt, insult, cutting you down, go ahead and deal with that quickly. Sometimes it may mean talking with that person, But, there are people who are so toxic that you really can't afford to have another conversation with them. The best thing you can do is put some boundaries up and only give them as much of your time and attention as necessary, but talk to somebody who can help pull you out of the tar while you only have one fist stuck. And somebody who's smart enough to grab your other hand before you strike again. Settle matters quickly. Recognize quickly when you are headed down this destructive path. And my favorite verse on this, Ephesians 4:26. Ephesians 4:26, I want to read it from two different translations so as to really let this sink in. First, New American Standard. Be angry and yet do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Now, before we move that, I want you to pay attention to something. It says, be angry and yet do not sin. Now, let that chew on that in a minute, and I hope you'll start seeing something. Just being angry is not a sin. Anger is just an emotion like sadness or gladness or madness. Anger is just an emotion that you're going to feel when something happens that hurts, that stings, or that threatens you in some way. If you immediately think that you're sinning because you're angry, you're defeated before you even start. Because you think, I've already messed up, I'm angry. No. When you get angry, that's the time to start paying attention. It's possible to be angry and not sin. And the key to that, according to the Scripture, is you deal with it right then. You deal with it quickly. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. Let's read it, one other translation. English Standard Version. Be angry and do not sin. Recognize you're angry. Say, okay, I'm angry, but I'm not going to sin. I'm not going to mess up here. I'm not going to get all stuck. And again, the way, do not let the sun go down on your anger. Don't go to bed angry. Don't go to bed angry if you can possibly help it. I may have told you, my wife and I have a rule that we operate by, and that is we don't talk about anything negative within 2 hours of bedtime. If she's got some, it would have to be a very rare case, some sort of emergency or something. But just generally speaking, if there's something she needs to tell me about that she knows is going to be disturbing, she knows it might upset me or scare me or worry me or make me mad, whatever, she doesn't mention it before we go to bed, and I do the same with her. Because I discover that what you go to bed focused on will affect what happens as you sleep in your unconscious, your subconscious mind. It will affect what kind of mood you're in when you wake up the next morning. So sometimes you just have to say, okay, I heard that. I'm going to put that on hold, like Scarlett O'Hara. I'm not going to think about that today. I'll think about that tomorrow. You don't always have to deal with everything the moment it happens. In fact, the moment something happens is sometimes the worst time to deal with it. Because while you're angry, when it's a fresh wound that is stinging, everybody knows that when people are hurting, when are you most likely to say a wordy word? It's when you stump your toe. It's when you cut your finger, you bump your head. When you're hurting, things will come out of your mouth and go through your head that wouldn't ordinarily come through your head and out of your mouth. So sometimes pause Pause. Tell yourself, okay, I'm not ignoring this. I'm not suppressing this. I'm not denying this. But I'm also not going to address this in this moment. This is not the right time for this conversation. Every now and then, Melina and I will be talking, and a subject will come up that I can tell she and I really need to talk about. It's something we really need to deal with. But if I happen to be in sort of a bad mood, or I'm already stressed about something else, I'll say, we got to have this conversation. So mark it down, take note. This is very important, but right now is not when we need to talk about it, because if we do, I'm going to get worked up. I know myself. I'm a tar baby beater. I will get myself worked up. I'll get mad. I'll lose my footing. I'll get mad, and you know what'll happen? I'll wind up going to bed angry. Now, did you know that there's brain science that goes along with this scripture? I don't know. I doubt the Apostle Paul knew much about neuroscience, but it turns out what he says has a lot of scientific validity. The lady, the cognitive neurologist I mentioned, Caroline Leaf, she says when you get offended, when you get upset, something makes you mad, or just maybe it's not a person, some event happens that disturbs you, makes you sad, gets you worried, whatever it is. She says, don't suppress it. Don't deny it. We're not saying pretend everything's right when it's not. She says, you got to process it, but the neuroscientist says, don't process it for too long. Don't ruminate on it for too long. You know, and what's too long? Guess what's too long? 48 hours. 48 hours. So see, if you go ahead and deal with it, if you process it and stop before the sun goes down, you're a day ahead of schedule. But you got a flex day in there in case you mess it up the first day. On the second day, process it, get some help, call on somebody, tell them what you're upset about, get their perspective, because here's the deal. When it's not them who's feeling insulted, when it's not them who's worried, when it's not them who's upset, they have some clear vision that you can't possibly have. Being hurt, being offended, being angered puts a twisted pair of Coke bottle glasses on us that distorts our perception and makes a lot of things look way worse than they really are. Talk to somebody who's not in that little mess with you, who's not already in the tar with you. Tell them, say, tell me what you see me doing. Am I sabotaging myself? Am I making this worse? Am I letting this get bigger in my head than it really is? Do something like that in the first 48 hours, and here's why. Because you know what? On the third day, after the 48 hours, that negative thought begins turning into a long-term memory. It does. When you keep going back and forth, okay, what do I need to say the next time I see that sucker? What am I going to do back? You know what's happening as you're doing that? After the third day, starting the third day, physical changes are actually beginning to form in your brain. It takes 21 days to form a long-term memory. That is something that sticks with you that you won't be able to let go of very easily. Whatever you do, don't let something go 21 days without dealing with it. Because after about 21 days or so, you will have actually grown the material that is going to haunt you long term with something that was really just a tar baby sitting by the road. It can get you permanently stuck. You know, one of my many favorite writers is Ralph Waldo Emerson. There's a quote I want to give you from him. A lot of people use this quote. I think he was the first, but it goes like this. Maybe you've heard it. Sow a thought, that is, you plant a thought. Sow a thought, and you harvest, you reap an action. You think about something long enough, it'll eventually result in you doing or saying something. And the good news is this works both ways, with good and bad, positive and negative things. You sow a positive thought, it'll lead to positive actions and positive words. You sow a negative thought by ruminating on it, picking it apart, pounding it, headbutting it, biting it, kicking it. It will lead to negative thoughts. These negative thoughts will lead to negative actions. You sow an act and you reap a habit. You sow a habit and you reap character. You sow character and you reap a destiny. You ever heard this phrase, you are what you continually think about? We become what we continually think about. By the way, habits, Caroline Leaf says it takes 63 days to form a habit. If you're good at arithmetic, you know 21 times 3 is 63, is that right? That means you let a long-term memory about something that upsetting that you're angry about, you let that go 21 days and you still don't do anything about it? Another 21, you've got a habit. Then your brain structure is actually changed to the point that it's past just thinking. It's past a thought that you had one day when you were hippity-hopping down the road and got insulted. You have become a habitual complainer, a habitual sourpuss, the kind of person that people see you coming and look for a way out of the conversation. You know those kind of people. Well, there's so much more I want to say. Let me wrap it up this way, though, while we're on this topic of you are what you continually think about. Be careful. Oh, remember the song, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see? Well, be careful, little mind, what you think? Oh, be careful, little mind, what you think? Because what you think about grows. Do you hear me? What you think about grows. What you focus on grows, whether it's something good or something bad. You focus on negative stuff, you will grow into a negative person. And guess what? Negative people, what do you think negative people attract into their life? More negative people. Because that's the only kind of people that can stand to be around them. Because they get together and commiserate and just have a big old time. The Ain't It Awful Club. Be careful, little mind, what you think. Here's the deal. All right. Stop feeding the fire that's burning your life down. There's a proverb, Proverbs 26:20. Fire goes out for lack of wood. You know what the wood is? The wood is when you keep talking about it. You just won't let it go. You just keep telling everybody who will listen to this sad, bad story about what happened to you and how pitiful you are. The more you do that, you're putting wood on the fire. But the Bible says the fire goes out if you stop putting wood on it. That's good news. That means some of your brain chemistry can actually start to deconstruct if you stop feeding it, fueling it. What occupies your mind will determine what you become. Years ago, a man named Napoleon Hill wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. And it's about how the right kind of thinking leads to prosperity, not only financially, but in every other area of life. Guess what? You can think and go rich, or you can think and grow poor. Most people who are really in serious poverty are poor in their thinking patterns as well. They expect the worst and they get it. And then say, I told you so. Almost as if, yes, I was right again. You can think and grow poor. You can think and grow lonely. You can think and grow mentally ill. And you'll attract what you continually think about. So I close with this verse. Philippians 4:8. Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Do you know how one way you neutralize a negative is by changing your focus to something positive? Do you know one way that you can diffuse the escalation of anger in you over something somebody did that hurt you or said that hurt you? You know what you can do? Instead of picking up your phone and firing back some mean text to them, pick up your phone and send an encouraging text to somebody who needs one. Call somebody and tell them how much you appreciate them. Go make somebody's day. And guess what happens? That becomes how you think, and that becomes who you are.